As I've traveled the world, I've become aware of things that most of us already know, but I've put them into words. For example, we become the average of the 5 people we associate with the most. Which means if you hang around with 5 broke people, you're going to become the 6th. If you hang around with 5 negative, whining people who are always focused in on who's right instead of what's right, you're going to become the 6th. And that's no way to run a family or to contribute to our neighborhoods and communities, and it's definitely no way to get the most important things accomplished as civic leaders and as public servants. I'm here to acknowledge every single one of you as a voter, as someone who gets heavily involved in our political system in my own little quiet, hopeful, influential way, and to take the 4.5 hours that I've been asked to speak today to just pay tribute and take you on an emotional roller coaster ride, so when you leave here, you understand fully and forevermore how rooted you really are in service. As I was picking Ms. Wood's brain before this conference and Mayor Hyatt's brain, talking a little bit to Roger and obviously to Beth, the incoming president, and talking to Nicole, and I said, what would you like me to talk about? And the first thing that came from every one of their mouths was, make sure you pay tribute to all of you who are hanging up your cleats, who have dedicated so many years, sometimes countless service to serving us, the citizens of Utah. And now you're hopping on your white horse and riding off into the sunset, hopefully not to be obscured, to still stay involved, but maybe lead without a title. So you don't have to stand because some of you are so old, that would really take a lot of energy. But how about if you just raise your hand if this is your last official conference as an elected official in your town or city? And let's definitely thank you. So if I had a chance to hop off the stage and just make this really personal and interview some of you for some of your war stories and put our focus really on relationships, at the end of the day, it's not what we do, it's who we do it with. And as people who gather together behind closed doors to make decisions that influence millions of people, I think my message today really can revolve around the significance of relationships and reminding us that really at the end of the day, we become the average of the 5 people we associate with the most. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Relationships. So may I ask you some questions? I've taught public speaking now at the university level for 10 years. A couple of years in the MBA program at Westminster College, 3 years at UVU, 5 years at BYU, and that's kind of cool because I'm a Ute, played football and baseball at the University of Utah, so I would show up in my red tie. And now I started in January teaching at the University of Utah as a public speaker and as a professor of public speaking. I remind my students that it's not about who's right, it's about what's right. And that it's not enough for us to just practice what we preach, we must preach only what we practice. And the quickest way to get involved in any audience of any size is to ask some questions. So question number 1. Do you agree in every aspect of our lives that before you can get it right at work, you must get it right at home? Because we have to be the same off stage as we are on stages. There's absolutely no credibility. Do you agree? Let's illustrate relationships. Thanks for the 5 of you who really agreed. Preacher's in the middle of his sermon, and all of a sudden the back door of the church slams open, and in walks the devil. All the church members climb out the windows. Preacher slides out the back door, and one good old boy sits there in the church defiant. He's sitting on the bench. The devil walks up to him and says, apparently you don't know who I am. Good old boy says, yeah, you're Satan. Devil says, apparently you don't realize with one gesture I can have you cast to outer darkness. Good old boy says, yeah. Devil says, apparently you don't realize with one command I can have you tormented for eternity. The good old boy says, yeah. The devil says, and why aren't you afraid of me? Good old boy says, listen, I've been married to your sister for 42 years. And there's nothing you could ever do that would intimidate me. We got to get it right at home, do we not? And let's come to the rescue of the women in the room, because I just kind of threw you under the bus. In defense of you wonderful, wonderful women, this lady dies, and sure enough, she shows up at the pearly gates. When she gets to the front of the line, Peter says, If you can spell the word love, you're in. She goes, seriously? He says, yeah. She says, Love. He says, you may enter. Out of curiosity, she hangs around to see if that's the question that everyone's asked. Sure enough, it is. Peter says, you've been here so long, could you fill in for me? I got to go run in there and just keep the line moving. She says, okay, next person, spell the word love, you're in. Love, you may enter. Next person up, spell the word love, you're in. Love, you may enter. She looks down at the end of the line, and all of a sudden there's her husband waving his arm. She calls him to the front of the line. She says, how did you die so suddenly today? He says, I know I should have attended your funeral this morning, but my buddies called me and talked me into playing in this golf tournament. And on my way home, I got hit by a bus and I was killed. So how do I get into this heaven? She says, spell Czechoslovakia. Are we on the same page? And let's face it, I'm 60 and there's some folks in this room that represent the elderly. Elderly meaning older than me. I have a video collection that's priceless. Johnny Carson, some of you are young enough to not even have a clue who he is. The Tonight Show. He has a 107-year-old man on his show, and I've got it on video. Johnny says, it says here in your bio, you're 107 years of age. This little wiry, bitty fire plug. He goes, yes, I am. Johnny says, it says here in your bio, you've been married 7 times. Good old boy says, yeah, loved them all, just outlived them all. Johnny Carson says here, your current wife is 35 years old. Aren't you afraid of a heart attack? Old boy says, hey, if she goes, she goes. There's no time limit on public service. How dare some of you raise your hands that you think this is your last hurrah? We absolutely need to pay tribute to you and say thank you. But more importantly, please, please, remember that when an old woman dies, an entire library burns to the ground. That wisdom is the gift of the elderly. That you are natural resources full of so much experience and energy. We need you desperately, and I'm going to hit home that particular idea before I get through flapping my jaws, to make sure that when we leave here, not only are we reminded that we're all rooted in service, but there's no time limit at all. You know, I understand Jim Lovell, and I've been on the program with him a few times as you're a wonderful speaker, sponsored by Zions Bank, and to have our illustrious group of people here with obviously Steve Hyatt, the mayor, the president outgoing, his wife Brooke. We obviously have John Pike from St. George, his lovely wife Christy, and his beautiful, wonderful daughter Abby, who works for Congressman Chris Stewart. We have Roger. Talk about the elderly statesman who's still involved, drinking his Dr. Pepper so he can have energy to make it to the table. And we got John Bronson from Zions Bank, who obviously brought in Jim Lovell. Sponsorships matter, as the mayor suggested. I hope all of us are willing to do what Rocky Mountain Power is famous for, customer service. They could have a monopoly, right? 3 states, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming. They could be part of a bigger organization, Pacific Corp, but yet they see the sensibility and the necessity to give more than they take away, and they do so much in our community. It's an honor to be sponsored and be on the same program with you, Gary and Arlene. And your incoming president, Ms. Holbrook, I think that's so cool that she has an arm in a sling, proving true that it's really not that everything that it's cranked up to be serving on this board. And I wish you luck, and combat pay should be now in your next rule of law. Having said that, could I just pay tribute to service before self for a moment in a different way? I know Jim Lovell, he was on Apollo 13 and he was an astronaut his entire career, and he's scratching and sniffing on that age called 90 years old or 90 years young. And he's still sharp as a tack, and he told the entire story, if that's what he usually does, of crisis management and what do you do when something happens, and it's not what happens to us, it's what we do with what happens to us that defines us. What an elegant and an amazing human being. But one of the parts of the story that you don't understand that Roger pointed out before the meeting is that most of the engineers, most of the individuals in that mission control room in Houston dealing with that Apollo 13 crisis were under 30 years of age. You look at the demographic age, average age in this room, and we obviously always need to attract the younger crowd to pass the torch. The purpose of a leader is to grow more leaders. The purpose of a leader is not to generate more more leaders. It's to create more followers. And that's what I've learned about Mr. Hyatt and trying to do my due diligence on how he affects Kaysville, Davis County, and all of you as your president. I'm intrigued by Cameron Deal as your choice for the new executive director slot, a young man who brings fresh eyeballs and fresh hearing and an ongoing heart to the league to take action and do everything that you need to do. So yeah, we're all rooted in service, but here's my question. What if you don't have a title? How can you leave the Sheraton Hotel, go back to your towns and cities and inspire everyone to get involved, not because it's expected by leadership, but because it's demanded of themselves? Anybody here from a small town? Your hand went up. Where are you from, sir? Price, that's not a small town. I've been to Price. Oh, this lady's waving. Where are you from? Woodland Hills? How many people?
About 1,400.
1,400. Can anybody beat 1,400? Yeah, where are you from?
Mayfield.
What is it called?
Mayfield.
Mayfield? What's your name? Julie. So they miss you today. They're like, where's Julie? Mayfield, 500 people, 492, 493, 494. Where's Julie? It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog, right? And every time I had an opportunity to visit small town Utah or small town USA, I was the guy in the Reagan White House that Nancy Reagan brought in to take her Just Say No program to all 50 states. So between 1983 and 1989, I spoke to over 6.5 million teenagers in thousands and thousands of schools in all 50 states. It started speaking to every high school and junior high in the state of Utah. In 1982, the Utah State Legislature funded me, and then they renewed that contract for the next year. So I've been to every little town and nook and cranny in Utah. I know how to say Escalante. I know how to properly say hurricane. I know why it says Tokerville and it's not Tuqueerville. I know where y'all from. And yet every time I would go into a small town and I'd say, you like it here? Most teenagers would say no. And I'd say, why not? There's nothing to do. Where did we get the convoluted idea that it's our community's responsibility to make our lives exciting? We can ask this to our adult population, and we're caught up in the same dilemma. I hate my job. Most people hate their jobs. They only look forward to Friday instead of Monday. They think they're paid by the hour, when in reality we're paid for the value we bring to that hour. How do we create more personal value? Service before self. Doing what we can in the moment with whatever we have. May I illustrate? I'm fortunate enough to fly on Delta Airlines, the greatest airline on our planet. A couple 100,000 miles a year. And I always fly first class. It's good for a big guy like me. I always get a window seat. Nobody bothers me. I don't bother them. It's where I've written a lot of my songs, a lot of my stories, a lot of my books on the road. And because I'm a public figure, as you are, we have a moral responsibility to increase the level of our commitment. Do you not agree? So, with my love of the military, it's not enough for us to just buy one of those magnetic bows that says support our troops, stick it on the side of our vehicle and feel like we're doing our civic duty. That's not enough. So I decided a long time ago that every single time I saw a soldier, a Marine, an airman, or a sailor on an airplane or in an airport, especially in an airport, I would buy him or her a meal. What a drag. No one ever told me they don't hang out all by themselves in the airport. They're always in groups of 3, 5. When they hear it's free food, there's a whistle in the men's room, 9 guys running out the men's room in formation. Hey, free Nathan's dogs, D5. Remember, we have to be the same off stage as we are on stage. So the reason why we go to an airport is to obviously catch a plane. So I better take that same high level of commitment, service before self, from the airport onto the airplane. Do you not agree? Flying first class, window seat. I'm sitting there, I've boarded first. You've all seen this. I'm on the plane, mostly by myself. They've served the beverages. I'm kicking back in my window seat, first class. And all of a sudden, the rest of the passengers start boarding the plane, and there's always one passenger dragging that 411-pound carry-on bag, holding up everyone. You've seen it? And if you're curious as I am, you can usually see 2 air holes drilled in the top. Aunt Shirley's inside. They refuse to splurge for an extra ticket. So they're like, keep quiet, you're going to get us arrested. They're dragging her down the aisle. Takes them 45 minutes to stick her up into the overhead, and now there's congestion. All the passengers are stopped. I'm in my first class window seat. I look left. Stopped. In the aisle, on my row, is a soldier in full uniform. So I chat him up. How you doing? He says, I'm fine, sir. I said, are you coming or going? He says, I'm just coming back from the desert, sir. They're always so polite. I said, where have you been? He says, I've been in Baghdad for 15 months, sir. I said, I bet you're excited to see your family. He gets emotional. He says, I sure hope they're excited to see me. I said, guaranteed, bro. Welcome home. I want to swap seats. Oh, no, sir, that's not necessary. I said, what do you mean it's not necessary? It's the least I can do. Flight attendant overhears me. Mr. Clark, that's so nice of you. I said, it's not so nice of me. I want to swap seats. You sit in my seat. You give me your ticket. I'm going to the back of the plane. You give him anything he wants. Take good care of him. I get his ticket. I go to the back of the plane. I'm looking for his seat, and wouldn't you know it, he's sitting in a center seat between 2 chubby guys. Now, I've lost 41 pounds since I got through playing football, but I'm still 6'5", weigh 235. I show up, these 2 guys are looking up at me like, oh, no. I'm looking back at them like, double no, excuse me, I sit down, oh, no. Let me interrupt. That's a 4.5-hour flight cross country. And I thought I was serving my fellow men and women. And when I got into that service, suddenly it was not what I thought it was going to be. Can any of you relate on the city council? Can any of you relate as mayors? Oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? Oh no. And what do we do in that circumstance? We're only human. We usually human default to the lowest common denominator where we feel sorry, we feel victim. You don't understand. I'm so old, I bend over to pull up my socks and I think, what else can I accomplish while I'm way down here? I started thinking about the nights I go to bed healthy and I wake up injured and all I did was lay there. Is that starting to happen to some of you? You wake up, your hip's asleep, your foot hurts, you're like, hey, what's going on around here? I'm starting to stretch out in case something happens at 2 a.m. What allowed me to stand up, sit up, stop treating these individuals as objects in my way, and start treating them as fellow human beings? We all came over on different ships originally, but we're all on the same boat now. Same God who made you, made me too. It was the memory of being downtown Baghdad when it was 141 degrees Fahrenheit. And on top of that, our soldiers, our Marines, our airmen, our sailors are wearing 85 pounds to 125 pounds of combat gear, running towards the sound of the guns, while bad guys are trying to pick them off to keep them from returning safely home to their families, while we're at the mall. Why we argue in politics about who's right instead of what's right. Knowing full well that Jim Lovell reminded all of us that when there was a crisis, when John F. Kennedy stood up and said, we will put a man on the moon, not because it's easy, but because it is hard. Nobody asked who was Republican. Nobody asked who was Democrat. We were all Americans focused on what we can accomplish through true collaboration when we take the emphasis off the person and put it on the performance for the good of everyone involved. I know you know that, or you wouldn't have involved yourself in public office and public service. And as a taxpayer, we love you, we need you, we thank you. But isn't it wonderful to be able to be reminded every once in a while that when we come to a meeting with an agenda, when we come to the meeting with something preconceived, that at some point we have to realize that Congressman Chris Stewart, I'm a huge fan of, he's not a Utah State congressman. He's a United States congressman and can't just vote for the constituency or the constituents in his particular area, although we're the ones that elected him. At some point, don't you think we ought to make sure that we focus in on the significance of those who live next to us across the street in our communities? You know, as I travel the country and I listen and I'm at high-level meetings in the political world and especially the military leadership world, how many times do we hear complaints of the state governors and the state government agencies who complain about too much national involvement in our states? And then yet we come back to the state level, and sometimes our state agencies want to muddle in our local towns and cities when they're complaining about somebody doing that to them on a national country level. You don't need to applaud, but at some point we need somebody like me to just get in our faces and say, come on, let's be real and focus in on what we can do for the right reasons because we can root it in service. So back to my story. I'm now having a wonderful conversation with these two blokes right in the middle of them. And about 4 minutes later, I realize that what goes around comes around because I look up and they're walking down the aisle towards me is the guy I was sitting next to in first class. We get eye contact. I said, "What's up?" He said, "You made us all feel guilty." I said, "What happened?" He said, "The next soldier who got on board the plane, I gave him my seat." I said, "Hallelujah. Let me help you find yours." Wouldn't you know it, he's sitting in the row right in front of me in the center seat between two chubbier guys. He's so stuck he can't even turn around and keep complaining. And by the time we took off, 4 guys who had been sitting in first class were now sitting in the back of the plane where we should have been all along to pay tribute to our American fighting soldiers who are willing to die so that we can gather at the Sheraton Hotel, laugh, cry, think, feel, and do what we need to do to leave here differently. So every single person in your town or city always says, "I like me best when I'm with you, I want to see you again. I like me best when I'm with you, I want to see you again. I like me best when I'm with you, I want to see you again." And the story doesn't stop there. That night I check into my hotel and I had a really good night's sleep. I know you can relate. Service before self when you're not going to get the credit, when no one's going to call your name out, you're just behind the scenes doing everything you have the potential and capacity to do in that moment. And then the next morning I wake up, I shower, I shave, put on my coat, my tie, I show up to the ballroom to get a sound check. 5,000 folks at a national convention. And wouldn't you know it, the guy who introduces me is the guy who was sitting next to me in first class. He was the CEO of the company. We hadn't had a chance to get acquainted. And in our introduction, he made it so intimate, suggesting that 4 of us in first class had inspired one another to give up our seats to pay tribute to the military. You see what happens when we root ourselves in service for the right reasons and realize off the cuff that in corporate America, we give bonuses to those who are willing to sacrifice others so that they may survive. And in the military construct, we give medals to those who are willing to sacrifice themselves so that others may live. That contrasts the mentality and commitment level of any politically based organization or audience that I've ever had a chance to speak for. Which side are you on? Service before self, doing the right thing simply because it's the right thing to do. Having people from both sides of the aisle say, "I like me best when I'm with you. You really do love our town. You really do love our city." Or because we have some political agenda that has nothing to do with that particular moment in time. May I just share my experience going to the edge of space? That doesn't happen to too many folks from East High School. Although Jim Irwin, Apollo 15, graduated from East High School, walked on the moon. Cool. On October 23rd, 2010, I was invited to soar to the edge of space in a U-2 spy plane at a Beale Air Force Base outside of Sacramento, California. Because it's a classified mission, I can only tell you that at 70,000 feet above the Earth's surface, you can see 2/3 of the state of California. At 80,000 feet, you can see mapped outlines of America. And at 90,000 feet, you actually tear up and feel like you can reach out and touch the face of God. It was a spiritual experience I wish every one of you in this room could have. For almost 5 hours, I sat in the sounds of silence, looking at the curvature of the earth, gazing into the endless blackness of space. I could see where the blue turned to black. I could see the delicateness of the ozone. And wondering, wow, if we're the only ones here, this sure is a waste of a lot of space. And I started asking questions like, are we more than mere mortal beings living on a small planet for a short season? And you know what, from a political perspective, do you know what I realized? That every single border on planet Earth is man-made, not God-made. That at the end of the day, we truly are brothers and sisters, and that's not being politically incorrect. We're killing people in the name of God. We're having these huge debates and arguments based on some border, some county that gets more than we get. When we landed, my friends, do you know what occurred to me? Everything we can take with us when we die, I had aboard with me on that aircraft. Our education, you don't learn to know, you learn to do. And in Utah, we have some of the greatest higher education, and I believe the best public school system in the country, which needs to continuously be tweaked. We know that, and the funding issues fixed. We know that, and that's why you are elected. And God bless you with combat pay to fix what's broken. But all the information in the world isn't going to make a person successful. It's like the guy who has 3 PhDs, one in philosophy, one in psychology, one in sociology. He doesn't have a job, but at least he can explain why. So when we put emphasis on education for the state of Utah, again, let's remind each other, it's not what we know, it's what we do with what we know that matters. And if that's not something that could drive your agenda as public servants, I don't know what is. The second thing we can take with us when we die is our conviction. How deeply do we believe in Utah? How deeply do we believe in attracting and retaining people in your small towns? Not just attracting economic development from companies outside of the state, but retaining our very best young men and young women to continuously build our infrastructures, who want to stay in Tabillon, who want to come to a town with 500 people and say, my goodness, I can make a difference, because the experience and the illustrations and the example of everyone in that town coming together. On my radio show on Tuesday, I interviewed Bubba Johnson. He's the safety officer at NASA in Houston. And yeah, I wanted to hear all about his experience for 30 years and his part of the Apollo program, and he's an aerospace engineer who helped develop so many parts of the space shuttle mission. But most of our interview was about what happened as a community in the aftermath or during Hurricane Harvey. And story after story about citizen soldiers, if you will, volunteers from the smallest obscure towns that surround Houston, Corpus Christi, that was almost blown off the map, and how people, they call them the Cajun Army, in their big old trucks driving from Louisiana with their airboats in any way that they could serve without getting any credit. Yeah, we need to talk about what's going to keep people in your towns, in your cities, and are, again, rooted in service before self. The third thing we can take with us when we die is our character. Adversity introduces us to ourselves. May I just share a personal story that actually gives me the reason to be here? I played football for 13 years. One day in practice, the dream ended. We had a tackling drill. Coach blew the whistle. 2 of us ran into each other full speed. Only parts of our bodies that made contact, Lyle's helmet hit my neck and my helmet in a violent head-on collision. My right shoulder was smashed into the cutting edge of my fiberglass pads, and we slammed to the ground. And when Lyle got off of me, my eye drooped. I had loss of speech. I couldn't talk anymore, which momentarily returned. But my right side was paralyzed, and my arm dangled helplessly at my side. Coach comes running over. Clark, you all right? What happened? Rakasho Rokasha under my throat. He said, wow, are you from Spanish Fork? I'm just kidding you. He said, you better just lay there. I said, whoo. A doctor that was present on the field, he came over and he examined me, pulls the coach aside. He says, Clark's got serious nerve damage. In fact, he might even have serious brain damage. The coach looks at him and says, how will we ever know? Nice guy. Finally, my eye went back to normal. My speech came back. But my right side stayed paralyzed. My arm dangled helplessly at my side. I stayed paralyzed for 14 months. I went to 16 of the very best doctors in all of North America, and every one of them told me I would never get any better. Have you ever heard that? Any children in your communities heard that? And what happens if they believe it? They'll never get any better. May I interrupt for a second and just smash every one of us right in the face? I've been the keynote speaker 2 years in a row for the Utah Pharmacists Association. And so on my conference calls and doing my due diligence to ask questions about who's in the audience and what's the message they're looking for, I became privy to some inside information that shook me to my core. Do you realize that physicians in Utah prescribe 400% more Prozac than any other state in the entire country? We live here. I choose to live here. I love the people. I love the culture. I love the mountains, the rivers, the streams. I love everything. I love Delta Airlines. I love the governor. I love everything. I love Steve Hyatt. I love everybody. You cannot convince me that we have 400% more depressed people in Utah than any other place in the country. You ever been to New Jersey? Whoa. And some in charge say they blame it on the culture. Good enough is not good enough. That's the biggest bunch of crap I've ever heard. Who are we fooling? And in that mindset, my friends, what are we going to do to change that? Not medicate. When I hit rock bottom, do you know what I discovered? There's a giant difference between being depressed and being disappointed. Huge difference between being depressed and being discouraged. If you lose a loved one, if you lose a job, if you have a devastating divorce, you have a right to be sad. You don't need medication. We need the human spirit to fire us up and say, there are dreams for sale in Tabillon. There are dreams for sale in Vernal. There are dreams for sale in Price, if you can believe it. There are dreams for sale. I'm just kidding you. I'm getting back. There are dreams for sale in every one of your communities because you're the leader. Dreams for sale. Make it work. Stay here and let's build it with the attitude that when the water in the lake goes up, all the boats rise together. Be proud. Be proud. I'm told you'll never get any better. 16 physicians, 16 experts. And if I believed it, which I did at the time, I hit rock bottom and I couldn't move. I was immobilized. Any of you feel like that? Long story shorter, a friend brings me by a cassette tape to listen to by a, quote, motivational speaker by the name of Zig Ziglar. I'd never heard of this guy. I thought, whoa, his mom ran out of names. So out of curiosity, I listened to it, and it changed my life because he told stories. And as I started to get better, a phone call comes into the University of Utah football office. Will you send an athlete up to tell us about your program and how you turned your win-loss record around? And because I was there, Coach Wayne Howard says, Clark, will you go talk to the football team in Morgan, Utah? And I said, absolutely. And I drove up Weber Canyon crying, feeling sorry for myself, trying to figure out what I would say to these athletes so that they would feel sorry for me because no one likes to be alone. And the coach, Jan Smith, comes around in a makeshift golf cart wheelchair-looking thing. He has multiple sclerosis. He eventually passed away. And suddenly, I didn't feel sorry for myself anymore. Spoke before 7 of their 8 games. They won the state championship. And that's when I went to the state legislature and had this program funded. And the rest of my experience is history. May I just remind all of us here that I love to remind myself? Clearly, my football accident was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Don't misunderstand. My accident wasn't one of the best things that happened to me, but who I became as a man and what I learned about priorities and time management clearly makes it one of the best things that's ever happened to me. I wouldn't be here today if it hadn't been for that accident all those years ago. So the tough times that you've had in your towns and cities are only reasons for us to test our character, which is one of the 4 things we can take with us when we die. As I said, adversity introduces us to ourselves. No one will ever know how strong we are until we're tested. Under pressure, you don't step up your game, you succumb to the level of your preparation, training, and practice. Which means pressure is not something that is naturally there. It's created when you question your own ability. And when you know what you can do, when you know what you've been trained to do, there's never any question. Interesting. That brings up to something that I really want to talk about because we're rooted in service. May I have them put up a slide, please, for just a moment? When you arrived, you had this little card on your chair. And because we become the average of the 5 people we associate with the most, I want to keep in touch. But because I don't speak in Utah very often, and that's my new goal, to speak here as often as I can to get back to my roots, I want to give away a free speech to your town or city or to one of the sponsoring corporations here. And hopefully you know it's more than just a $19 value. If you could pull out your phones right now and just go to your text messages, and if you would type in the number 801-980-9291, and then enter in the code ULCT, obviously Utah League of Cities and Towns. In the next few minutes, you're going to receive a text, and on that text, you'll have a link where you can just click on the link, and before this conference is over today, before I leave the stage, hopefully it works, it does, it always does, I will randomly select who receives that free speech, and it sounds so arrogant. Yeah, you want me to come to your community, but it's my way of giving back, and I really hope you'll take advantage of this opportunity. Again, enter in ULCT. In the next few minutes, you'll get a follow-up text, and I'll refer to that again before I walk off the stage. While this is an opportunity to percolate and incubate our opportunity to keep in touch, let me just shift gears for a moment. And hopefully this will impact you for the rest of your life as a public service announcement, as a public servant of what we can do in our communities to make a long-lasting difference. When I was in the Reagan White House doing Mrs. Reagan's Just Say No between 83 and 89, some of you in this ballroom are old enough to remember that in that same time frame we had a suicide epidemic in North America, all 10 provinces of Canada and all 50 states. Some of you are aware of this. I heard the other day that Utah now leads the nation in teenage suicides. It's starting to raise its ugly head again. What do we do about it? And I want to throw my hat in the ring and get involved. If you bring me into your community, we could have a community deal in the evening with parents and students and laugh and cry and think and feel and have a third person come in and kind of help you understand and help your people understand what you're trying to accomplish as their leaders. Back in the day, I was flown into Plano, Texas. They had 6 suicides in their high school in one day. Plano, Texas, the Beverly Hills of Dallas. They had 6 suicides in their high school in one day, 7 in the same week. I was flown to the shore of New Jersey, South Shore of New Jersey, Ocean Township, Asbury Park, Long Branch, very affluent. John Bon Jovi, Diamond Dallas Page, Bruce Springsteen. It's a pretty affluent area. They had 14 suicides in a day and a half. I was flown into Dubuque, Iowa, homeland. You know, American pie, apple pie, God bless us all. Mom, we love you. I was flown into Iowa, Hempstead High School, 2,000 students. In the 30 days prior to me coming to their school, they had 100 suicide attempts. One young lady died, beautiful head cheerleader. The rest survived. I was flown into town with a woman by the name of Charlotte Ross from San Mateo, California, the national co-chairperson for suicide prevention. So she took charge, obviously. She divided the 2,000 students in half. She took 1,000 students into the theater, and she did the left brain cognitive psychobabbling neurotechnical stuff. I took the other half of the student body into the gymnasium, and we did the right brain touchy-feely, laughing, crying, relational stuff. We swapped audiences, tried to repeat our performance at the end of the day, and then we invited in the healthcare professionals, the counselors, and the school administrators, and we individually and personally interviewed every single one of these 99 students who had attempted suicide and survived. Every single one of them told us the reason why they wanted to give up on life, the reason why they wanted to die and kill themselves was because they lacked commitment relationships in their lives. Do you? The fourth thing I learned that we can take with us when we die after I landed in my 5-hour adventure into space is the answer to the question, did my life matter? Did I make a difference? Did I leave a legacy that will outlast my lifetime? Because the goal is not to live forever. The goal is to create something that will. The goal is not to do business with everybody who wants what you have. The goal is to do business only with those who believe what you believe. So they choose you, not just somebody who does what you do. They choose your town, they choose your city, they choose your company, they choose your involvement, your reputation. They choose you over everybody else because I like me best when I'm with you. I want to see you again because we become the average of the 5 people we associate with the most. Every single one of these students told us the reason why they wanted to kill themselves was because they lacked commitment relationships in their lives. Do you? Let me pause and deepen our understanding of commitment by introducing another word, love, which I love to think about and I love to talk about. How many of you are in love? Show of hands. How many of you are in love? Is this your wife right here? Very cool. It's kind of amusing. I said, how many of you are in love? She raises her hand. She looks at you and you went. That's good. Yeah. Do you agree love is a commitment, not a way of feeling? Romance is not love. Romance comes from a Greek word that means erotic. So I don't even want to talk about it. If I love you because you're beautiful, that's romance. But if you're beautiful because I love you, that's real love. It's a value-creating love that inspires us to be the best that we can be. Yet how many of us confuse love, commitment with romance, emotion? What have we said our whole lives? Oh, I love her so much, she makes me feel differently than I've ever felt before. Oh, I love him so much, he makes me feel differently than I've ever felt before. So do breakfast burritos. If you think you're in love, just maybe you need a long, cold shower and a box of Rolaids. What's my point? I love you means absolutely nothing unless we back it up with action. So the 3 most powerful commitment-oriented words in this world are not I love you, regardless of what music and movies have massaged us into believing. The 3 most powerful commitment-oriented words in our language are I need you. Proof. I got into music in an interesting way. I've written songs forever until a good friend of mine, Jeff Soderbergh, decides he's going to get married. He phones me up, Clark, will you write a song for my wedding? I said, sure. He said, will you sing it? I said, no. In the next few minutes, he convinced me that we were best friends, that we went back a long ways, that it would be cool if I participated with him in his special day. He basically made me feel important. Think about that word. We all like to feel important. In fact, most of us try to act more important than we really are. That's why we have so many people driving around with trailer hitches on their cars and they don't even own anything to pull. Wow, follow her. She must have jet skis and a boat, 2 trailer hitches. I said, all right, I'll do it. 2 days later, he phones me back. Clark, the band just called and canceled. Could you prepare about 40 or 50 songs and play for the whole wedding reception? I said, no. He said, I need you. What a jerk. Had he said, I love you, I would have said, I love you too, man. Here's the number of a band. But because he made me feel like I was not just good, I was good for something, that my little weird-shaped puzzle piece really did fit, that I could make a significant contribution, I couldn't turn him down, and I don't think any of you could turn him down either. I practiced, I prepared. Finally, his wedding reception rolls around on the calendar. He makes a big deal out of my first little love song, gathers everybody around. I sat on my stool, sang my little song, everybody's crying. They disperse, start to have their refreshments, they socialize. I sang the first out of the 40 or 50 songs that I'd practiced and prepared, and all of a sudden the band shows up. Miscommunication. Now, I'm not foolish. I don't want to sit on a stool and sing all night. I want to eat like everybody else does. So I gladly helped the band set up all of their equipment. Now you think about this for a moment. When I arrived at that wedding reception, I arrived with the attitude in mind that I was needed. I would have stayed till 4 o'clock in the morning if necessary. I would have waited tables. I would have wiped tables. I would have swept the floor. Somebody spills, I had ownership. I don't have to wait for the custodian. You give me the mop. I'll clean it up. I would have sung 100 songs if necessary. I'd have made some up. On top of Old Smoky, all covered with snow, I lost my best bird dog by aiming too low. We would have had a motivational extravaganza. Second, the band shows up. Realistically, I am no longer needed. So why hang around? And I didn't. I left the wedding reception. That is the message, ladies and gentlemen. That is the message coming through loudly and clear from these students all those years ago in Dubuque, Iowa, Hempstead High School, that has not changed, that is the solution to what we're facing in Utah schools and communities in 2017. Every single one of these students who had attempted suicide and survived told us they knew they were liked, they knew they were loved, but they didn't believe they were needed. And when we don't feel like we're needed, why hang around? Possibly the most provocative question you will hear this entire conference: are you needed? And if not, why not? And if when, why not now? And here's the kicker. Because of the nature of our society that each of us have helped create, we cannot afford to wait for somebody else to tell us or show us that we are needed. It might not ever happen. We have to do something on a daily basis to prove to ourselves that we are needed. So the kicker word in commitment relationships is to participate more and get involved. As leaders, to create environments, to create situations and opportunities for people to volunteer, for people to get involved and prove to ourselves that we are needed. A couple of years ago, I spoke 202 times, all 50 states and 21 countries. And never once did anyone ever come up to me after my speech and say, "How are you?" You don't care. So what am I supposed to do? Just go back to my hotel room, feel sorry for myself? Nobody likes me, guess I'll just go eat worms? No, we have to do something on a daily basis to prove to ourselves that we are needed. If you don't feel like you're needed at home, participate more, get involved. If you don't feel like you're needed in your family, participate more. Needed in your children's lives, participate more. If you don't believe that your community feels like they're needed and they're just going to bail and go off to school and be hired by somebody else who understands the quality of our culture here in Utah, that produces the most extraordinary young men and young women in the workforce. And one of the reasons why so many major corporations are coming here to hire our workforce, shameful that we let some of our best people leave and teach in other states because we don't fund education in the way we could. With creativity, nobody seems to have the solution anywhere in our country, so I challenge you, as everybody challenges us, to just do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. We need to get involved, and that's the solution. It's so simple. Participation, get your community more involved in your community, and it's amazing how that one thing solves everything. May I conclude? My dad, cotton farmer on the east side of Phoenix, Arizona, became very, very successful. In the early 1960s, he came to Utah, started his own insurance company, his own financial corporation, became very, very successful. My dad, never an athlete, dark hair, dark eyes. My mom, the greatest mom who ever lived. The youngest of 9 children, raised by a single mom in a little town called Grace, Idaho, on a farm. My mom's 89 years old. She came to hear me speak the other day. She was on the front row. She hasn't heard me speak for so long. I introduced her. The crowd was so generous. I said, my mom's 89, and to this day, she still inspires everyone through service before self. Her entire life has been rooted in service. I said, my mom, my gosh, she's my hero. The other day, she went into the doctor for her annual physical. The physician said, Ruby, you need more exercise, so she signed up for an aerobics class for seniors. And sure enough, she bent over, jumped up and down, twisted and turned, perspired for over an hour. But by the time she got her leotard on, the class was over. And my mom's on the front row. That's not funny. That's not true. I love my mom. Never an athlete, dark hair, dark eyes. My older brother, Sam. Some of you know Sam Clark, bonding, Dale Barton Agency. He has 4 degrees from major universities. That's sick. I was not on the honor roll every time. I had to compete with him and my family. One time I came home with a report card, had 4 F's and 1 D on it. My dad's response, son, looks to me like you're spending too much time on one subject. I love my dad. He gets me. My dad battled cancer for 6.5 years. I wanted to be by his bedside when he took his last breath. That didn't happen for me. I was out of town speaking in the northwestern United States up in Seattle, Washington. I was in town for 2 days to speak to 2 large trade associations downtown at the convention center. I'm staying out of town at the Seattle Airport Marriott Hotel. It's Friday morning, October 12th. And yes, again, I've showered and shaved, put on my coat, put on my tie, I'm ready for the day. Phone rings. I think it's my ride downtown to the convention center, so I pick up the phone and I almost flippantly say, I'll be right there. But for some odd reason, I just stood there. 15 seconds of silence later, my younger brother's voice pierces the quietness of the call. Danny? I said, Paul, what's up? He said, Dad died this morning at 7 a.m. I said, whoa. I sat down on the edge of my bed, and the tears just started to fall. May I interrupt? I'd give anything to have my dad back one more day, and it's too late. I have regrets. I'm a songwriter. I had my first gold record in country music with a guy by the name of Michael Peterson. We wrote the song Drink, Swear, Steal, and Lie. I'm an inspirational genius. One of my more popular hits at weddings is Had I Shot You When I Met You, I'd Be Out of Jail by now. But the greatest song that I've written so far is about my sweet dad. It's called Special Man. Lyrical hook, any male can be a father, but it takes a special man to be a dad. That's my dad. And I have regrets. I'd give anything to have him back one more day. As an author, I love to interview people. My favorite interview is always with an elderly person. Elderly meaning someone older than me. And they will always remind us they do not have regrets for things they did do. They only have regrets for things they did not do. Will any of you, especially those of you we honored who raised your hands, saying that you've given so many hours and so many years of your life, unselfish service before self, we need you. We love you. Good. I love you too. You're no longer off the hook. We need you. I said to my brother Paul, how's mom? He said, she's all right. I said, give her a big hug and a kiss for me, will you please? Tell her I'll phone her as quickly as I can. And then he asks me the gajillion-dollar question. What are you going to do? And may I amend that to you in the League of Cities and Towns. What are you willing to do that no one else is willing to do? What are you going to do when you leave the Sheraton to make a difference, to leave that legacy so your life matters? I said, Paul, Mom and Dad have spent an entire lifetime teaching us to keep our promises, to keep our commitments. I can't imagine what it would be like to be a meeting planner with a 90-minute slot to fill 3,500 people in the audience and not have the speaker show. I got to do that. I got to rise to the occasion. That's what Dad would want me to do. Then I'm going to spend the night. I'm going to keep my promise, my commitment on Saturday. Then I'm going to hustle home. God knows I need your support, and hopefully I can give you some of mine. I hung up the phone with my brother, and I sat there on my bed, and I openly wept like a wee child. This is my dad, my hero, gone. And it's going to happen to every one of us. What are we going to do about it? 15 minutes later, the phone rings again. This time it is my ride. I tell him I'll be right down. I go into the washroom. I splash some water on my face, try to freshen up to the best of my ability. I leave my hotel room, and I get on the elevator. And as the elevator doors start to close, the corner of the bellman's cart nudges its way through the opening, and they bing, back open. And on the elevator comes this way overzealous psycho bellman. I'll never forget him as long as I live. He's pushing this runaway cart onto the elevator, forces me back to the right rear corner of the elevator, and I assume the elevator position. Doors closed, we start going down, and he is relentless. Whoa, did you see the beautiful sunshine? He said, I've lived up here in Seattle, Washington, 15 years, rained every single day. You must have brought the good weather with you. How you doing? I said, I'm fine. You know when someone's been staring at you for a while and you don't even have to get eye contact, you can just kind of feel it and kind of sense it? All of a sudden he says, hey, mister, you're not fine. You've been crying. I said, yeah. I said, I just found out my dad died this morning, and I'm really sad. He said, whoa. Elevator comes to the lobby, the doors open. He goes his way. I meet my ride. He drives me downtown to the convention center. I'm introduced, and I make my speech. I had to dig deeper than I'd ever dug in my whole entire life to make that speech. But obviously, bottom line message for me, you can if you think you can. I got to the end of my speech, and I said to the audience, I'd like to conclude with a little song from one of my albums. And I said, the reason why I want to sing this little song is because my dad died this morning, and it's the first time he's ever heard me sing it in public. And again, I dug deeper than I'd ever dug and maybe sang the song better than I'd ever sung it. I concluded my speech, and I had the driver take me to the Seattle Aquarium. Am I now a hypocrite? I just honored the troops running towards the sound of the guns, having the guts to do what is necessary so that we may live, so that we may enjoy our freedom. No, I had the driver take me to the Seattle Aquarium to create a meeting. You see why I congratulate you for being here? And why I know when I get in my car, I will say I like me best when I'm with you. I want to see you again. The privilege of getting to know Steve Hyatt in a personal way and realizing he's that man of character. He's that leader that's natural. And to encourage him to continue on and lead without a title like so many of you must continue to do for the benefit of your town, for the benefit of your city, for the benefit of Utah, for the benefit of America. I'm at the Seattle Aquarium watching the fish swim, watching the otters float on their backs. They reminded me of some of the offensive linemen I used to play ball with. And that's when I easily coined phrases like pain is a signal to grow, not to suffer. Once you learn the lesson the pain is teaching you, the pain goes away in life. There's no mistakes, only lessons. How about crisis does not make or break the man or woman, it just reveals the true character within. Oh, wait, what about this one? Is the glass half empty or half full? Are you serious? Do you know anybody who sits around wondering if it's half empty or half full? They've missed the point, it's refillable. Thinking positively or thinking negatively does not fill up the glass. The pouring does. It's easier to act your way into positive thinking than it is to think your way into positive action. It's not the sugar that makes the tea sweet, it's the stirring, it's the process. Let's talk. Having learned the lesson, I had the driver take me back to the Seattle Airport Marriott Hotel. Here's where you come into my story. Here's where you come into my remarks. And here's where you accept my thanks and my tribute to those of you who understand, all of you who understand, that service before self is what it's all about, and it's how we live legacy. It's the single most important thing we can take with us when we die. The memory that we did make a difference. We did do our best to leave that legacy of leadership and love behind. I get back to the Seattle Airport Marriott Hotel. I walk into my room, and there on the dresser of drawers is a basket of fruit. And it's not your basic basket of fruit that's been delivered from the hotel gift shop. We've all seen these. Little color cellophane, little bow, little sterile stamp card. They never get our names right. Thanks for staying with us, Sergio. This was the coolest gift I'd ever received. It was a broken, smushed basket. One side was completely caved in. It looked like it was someone's second thought, maybe after hours, no resources available, but they still wanted to make a difference. Can any of you relate? I can see this hotel employee walking through the lobby. They look in the garbage bin. They're like, oh, well, that's too good to throw away. Steve Hyatt and the rest of the leadership team will be really proud of us. Do more with less. They retrieved it. They took it to my room. Whoever delivered it was obviously into presentation because they turned the broken, smushed part of my basket of fruit towards the wall. Apparently, whoever delivered it walked past that big fake tree in the lobby, yanked off one of those fine rubberized leaves, stuck that in front of the broken, smushed part of the basket. In my basket of fruit, there was a tomato and a huge carrot and a handwritten card that said, Mr. Clark, I'm sure sorry your dad died. I'm supposed to get off work at 5 o'clock. I've asked to stay on all night long so I can be here just for you. Room service closes at 10 o'clock. The kitchen has agreed to stay open all night long so they can be here just for you. If you need anything, just call and ask for me, signed, James, the bellman in the elevator. He's not the only guy who signed my little card. Every single hotel employee that night at the Seattle Airport Marriott Hotel signed my little card. I still have it matted in a frame hanging on my office wall to this day. Let me debrief and conclude. Here we have the youngest person in the entire employee payroll who seemingly gets it. Guess what? Service before self. Here we have the lowest paid person in the entire employee payroll who seemingly gets it. Guess what? Money's not a motivator. Volunteerism, making a difference, proving to ourselves that we are needed, and having everybody leave us saying, I like me best when I'm with you, I want to see you again is the goal. And then I learned about loyalty. You want to be reelected? You want people to stay in your town? You want people to recommend Rocky Mountain Power because they're so widely known all over this blooming region for customer service and class leadership? Do you want Zions Bank to be spoken of highly in every single area of our community and in our Intermountain West, as I hear it is, because they're always helping, funding the chapel at Camp Williams, and their name's on everything you can imagine. God bless Zions Bank. What's it really all about? Loyalty. See, this young man reminded me about loyalty. Every single time I speak, I'm always relegated to stay at the property where they have the meeting. How many of you are staying here at the Sheraton or a local hotel, posh hotels? Yeah. I've stayed here before. The towels in my room are so fluffy, I was having a hard time getting my suitcase closed. Do you find that? But every single time I speak in Seattle, Washington, I always stay at the Seattle Airport Marriott Hotel. Even if I have to rent a car at my own expense, drive an hour and a half, 2 hours out of my own way to pay tribute to this brand called Marriott Hotels. Bill Marriott's so famous about take care of the employee and the employee will take care of the customer. And to take care of this young man who I have never met since, who represents everything that you represent to me as an outsider, as a taxpayer, as a voter, choosing you over party, choosing you because of principles, choosing you because you do the right thing simply because it's the right thing to do. That's what makes Utah so extraordinary, and that's why it makes Utah politics so fascinating to me, and such a wonderful place to raise a family and to contribute in to every aspect of our lifestyle and quality of life that I can possibly do. Again, if you can go to your text, and hopefully on your phone you've now received a follow-up text that gives you a link. If you can click on that link, please, and just fill in your name and email, it's a simple deal. Then you will qualify to receive a free speech, and you can start receiving a lot of free stuff, books from my situation and my office and my operation. My phone is right next to, can you throw that, please, see if I can catch? Oh, good. So, I shall announce. So some of you are like, so let me get this straight. Your cholesterol count's higher than your SAT scores, you played football. And here we go. So, you know what's going to be really interesting? Some of you are like, Clark, my clothes have gone out of style just since you started speaking. Will you please hurry? And aren't you glad that this is not about technology, it's about people? So, under the direction of His Majesty Mayor Hyatt, we will notify who is the winner before this conference is over, hopefully by tonight. And you'll each individually receive an opportunity to say you won or you did not win. On the chair is that card again for us to keep in touch, and hopefully you'll bring me into your community. I really want to do that. The 30-second close and tribute to you that I always use to tie a bow around everything we talked about is a simple story that illuminates support, and it relates to every one of us here. It relates to those victims who are no longer victims at Hurricane Harvey, those victims who are no longer victims of Hurricane Irma. It's not what happens to us, it's what we do with what happens to us that matters, but we're never alone. And I challenge us all to give more because we can, illustrated in a 30-second vignette. A mother encourages her daughter to come home as soon as school is over. The time comes, the time goes. 30 minutes later, daughter walks in through the front door of her home and her mother scolds her. Where have you been? I've been worried sick. She says, oh, Mommy, I walked my friend Sally home from school. She dropped her doll on the sidewalk. It broke all to pieces. It was awful. Her mother says, so you're late because you stayed to help your friend pick up the pieces of the doll and put it back together again? She said, oh, no, Mommy, I didn't know how to fix the doll. I just stayed to help her cry. Leadership 101. Not just tears of sadness, but tears of joy and victory and celebration of why your town and city is so significant based on the people over profits and the message and the example that you've set all these years. Even if you've only been in office for a short time, even if you've dedicated so many years of your life and you raised your hand as someone who's given it everything you've got when less would be sufficient, I think the challenge in this room is to leave here and do more and make sure we die with our boots on, never leaving regrets so that we don't die with our music still in us. I'm proud to live in Utah. I sing our praises. Thanks for believing in me, Mr. Hyatt. God bless you. And again, I hope I see you again. You have a wonderful day.